Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Some hours ago, we finished up yet another session of All for One Régime Diabolique, where we got to have a lot of fun with Musketeer Daring Do in a horror version of 1630s France. This video isn't about that, but the experience during that session did kind of crystallize some of what I've been thinking about lately and what I've been talking about lately. I got a lot of answers about my disarming video, which once again is only about 24 hours old. And quite a few people said, hey, even though it says that when you disarm somebody, they drop the thing, and when the battle master uses his disarming strike maneuver, the sword or whatever happens to be drops at the combatant's feet. Well, then you can use your free interact with an object action to kick it away, which I found kind of interesting. A little bit funny, simply because when I'm imagining disarming somebody, I'm not imagining it going down that way and then it drops to their feet and then you kick it. There's a slightly different movie going on in my head, but okay. But it made me wonder one thing, and this is not what the video is about, but be honest now when you answer this, if you answer this. Because I got the same answer over and over and over again. Is this something that you sussed out by reading the book, or is this something that came up on the internet? Is this something that showed up in Sage Advice or something like that? I'm curious as to where that adjudication came out, simply because it wasn't word for word, but it came back the same way, like over and over and over again, which always raises my eyebrows a little bit. Anyhow, what I'm actually thinking about, though, is part of the nature of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons and their combat, where it tries to be kind of abstract and granular all at once. What am I talking about? Like, there are systems that are very, very abstract in their handling of things like combat, like Ubiquity. Today we were playing All for One Régime Diabolique, and during combat you can take 3 actions, if you will. You have an attack action, which you can use to do all sorts of things, but generally you attack with it in one way, shape, or form, whether it's a melee attack or ranged attack or a grapple or because they do have a brawl skill, all that sort of stuff, which handles things like pummeling and grappling and all kinds of stuff, actually. It's very abstract, once again. There is a move action, where you can move up to your movement, whatever that happens to be. Once again, it's rather abstract. And generally, you just look at the numbers. Sometimes you look at the actual distance if you want to. And then you can take any number of defense actions based upon how many times people try to hit you in some way, shape, or form. However, the subsequent defense actions after your first one are at a 2-die penalty, and it's a cumulative 2-die penalty, and sooner or later you run out of defense dice. You're only able to do that a certain number of times. Now, you can also use a different type of reaction when things happen. It's kind of analogous to a saving throw, where you get to roll, say, something like double your dexterity would be very common. But once again, the more of those things that happen, the more that you're trying to react defensively or dodge or whatever it happens to be, you're taking these cumulative 2-die penalties. At some point, you just run out of time. And the rounds are about 6 seconds, give or take. It's kind of analogous to a Dungeons and Dragons round. Now, it's very, very abstract. You do these various things, and then it's very much based upon your stated intent. What are the effects going to be on the other side? It's very much up to narration of the various people at the table what this all actually looks like. It's abstract. Contrast this with something like Mithras, which we've been playing, where it's very, very specific and very, very granular. And a round is a very short period of time, and you have a certain number of action points, and depending on how many action points is how many times you can do something, which may be attack, may be parry an attack. You can, you might not be able to actively defend if you run out of action points. They're a very valuable commodity because it's something that happens in a very short period of time, and each action is like a single sword thrust, a single parry. There's some special effects that you can choose from, but it's short, it's very granular, it's very, very specific. It's very different than Ubiquity combat. It produces a very different feel. Now, you take something like 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, which is, once again, it's at its core very, very abstract. These are 6-second rounds. An attack roll doesn't represent a single swing of the sword. It could represent several swings of the sword. It's just your attempt to hit somebody in that particular period of time. A grapple can take a large amount of time. The movement is, you can move quite a distance. You can, and depending on what you're moving through, we even remember that example I gave a long time ago about in Aloy's game, somebody swimming through a cistern and getting to the other side, and that's all part of their movement. So it's abstract. There's a certain amount of time in which we can do a bunch of different things. However, Then 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons makes an attempt at granularity on top of that by the action economy, by various things that it tries to insert. There are things you can do, specific effects that happen. And in my experience, anytime a game does that, it produces a monster. It produces nonsensical results at one point. And in this case of Dungeons and Dragons, very much is producing this it's not just an I go, you go sort of turn-based thing, but it kind of stutters, and there's moments where that happens like that, and there are other moments where it doesn't happen like that. And, what am I talking about? Let's look at this example. I forget if I actually ever put this into a video, but I gave this example of a 5th level fighter in the action economy, and he's holding a dagger in his left hand because he's a righty, and he's also prone on the ground. And what can he do in his turn on the round? Well, he can use his move action to stand up and then move 15 feet because standing up only took half of his move action. He can then draw his short sword as his interacting with object, because apparently he didn't have his short sword in his right hand when I wrote this out. He just had his dagger in his left. Then he can attack twice as his action, because he's 5th level, so now he has 2 attacks for his action. Then, as his bonus action, he can attack with his dagger. And then, let's see, what else? An opponent disengages, and they retreat without disengage, rather. And so he gets an attack of opportunity. He can attack again with this short sword. And another opponent tries to grapple him. And so he gets to do an athletics check, which costs him nothing to attempt to escape this grapple. It's not an action. And he's able to do that. And then 3 people try to attack him. Spellcasters, poison spray, acid splash, and I forget what the other one happens to be because I can't read my really bad writing. But another spell, all of which require dexterity saving throws. And he's able to save versus all of these, all in the space of 1 round. There's a lot of things that happen and he can do. And it depends. It's arbitrary. It's not dependent upon the fiction. It's depending upon what these things are mechanically and what the rules say about these specific things. And so we go back to our example of the person that's dropped their sword or been disarmed of their sword by the battle master or by another person. And their sword is now on the ground. And now this other person is free to use their interact with an object as a part of their move or their action to kick the sword out of the way. Or as somebody had mentioned, try to pick it up. All these sorts of things. And the person that's just been disarmed stands there helplessly and cannot move, can't react, can't do anything, just kind of stand there. Interesting, isn't it? However, if somebody tried to grapple them at that same exact moment, they could push and pull and do all kinds of things to prevent being grappled, because the rules say they can do that at that particular time. If people start to shoot various spells at them, or if a trap goes off and they have to make a dexterity saving throw, they can make a number of dexterity saving throws, all of which involve movement and reacting at that point. If this fellow that just disarmed them tries to, disarms him and then tries to run away, and maybe he's got a rapier in one hand and a main gauche in the other hand. I've got the all for one on the mind, and he's just been disarmed of his rapier. Well, now I can make an attack of opportunity now with this main gauche, can't I? Because he's run away, unless he's disengaged. Because I can use my reaction, which I haven't used. Can I use my reaction to fight this guy that's trying to kick my sword away, my rapier away at this point, or pick it up? You tell me. Is that okay to use a reaction at that moment? The rules get very, very specific at times, letting you know when you can use a reaction, when you can't use a reaction. My favorite is the bonus actions, when there's a various number of things that give you a bonus action. And if one of these circumstances doesn't happen, you don't have a bonus action to take. Okay, great. Because very often it seems to be, they seem to want to give somebody an additional action. They're not sure what to do, so they just, okay, you get a bonus action for this. It's easier for the thief or the monk to do certain things like dash and disengage and dodge, so now they can use their bonus action so they don't have to sacrifice the regular action. Okay? I get that. Go back to this 5th level fighter, though. He's got that dagger in his left hand. Why does he get a bonus action to attack with this dagger in his left hand? Because he has a dagger in his left hand. I think I mentioned this in another video. That's one of the things that made me laugh out loud when I read it and I was examining something like bonus actions. You gave yourself a bonus action by simply picking something else up. Kind of funny, isn't it? And so, I'm left just kind of laughing at this moment when the person is disarmed, the sword drops at their feet, and then the other person is allowed to use their interact with an object as part of their move or action. But you can't, being the person that's just been disarmed, because you have to wait for your turn to then do that as part of your action. Or are you allowed to use a reaction at that moment? I don't know. You tell me. But, Even if you say yes, you're allowed to use a reaction. Well, then what if somebody else grapples you? What if you have to run out of the way of these various, fireballs and whatever else requires a dexterity saving throw? You can see where I'm going. It's one of those things where it just doesn't all match up. It starts to create, at least in my experience, this bizarre monster where it's this stuttering, stop, start, you can, yes you can, no you can't, yes you can, and very often you find yourself in these positions where you can do a vast number of things. You're being attacked by several different people. Your defense roll never goes down. Whereas in something like Ubiquity, even though it's very abstract, there's this countdown. It gives you a lot of leeway in terms of what you can do, but you can only do so much because there's only so much time. Whereas in 5e Dungeons and Dragons, it gets a little wonky. Oh, there's only so much time, except when there's these things that happen, in which case you can do these other things. And at the end of the day, to me, in my experience, especially after looking at other games and playing other games, I start to go back to something like this, or go to 5e D&D and say, man, this thing is a monster, and is much less. It makes less sense fictionally. It makes less sense as it's actually going on. It tries to be, abstract and also simulate, and things at the same time. Choose which one do you want to do. If you try to do both, you end up doing neither.